We have a very special guest this morning, Pastor Chris Dawson from the River Church, Pukekohe. Thank you for joining us, Chris.
You're welcome.
So we've been working our way through the book of James over the last little while, and it's always interesting to see what stands out to people and what they bring for our group discussion. So, Pastor Chris, what have you found for us today to talk about for our small group get-together?
Well, so I was just going through the book of James, and I just, the Lord put me onto chapter 4. But I just want to read the second part of verse 2 from the 4th chapter. It says, you do not ask, you do not have because you do not ask God. And then verse 3, it says, when you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. And I'm just reminded of Psalms 37, where David says, take delight in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. You know, as we trust, or the other version says, when you trust in God, He is able to give you the desires. You know, many times we have so many desires, and it's always a question that we need to ask whether is the desire in line with God's will?
Yeah.
It's really fascinating too, because our heart, right? There's so much about the heart, and out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. And often God cares so much. Well, He always cares more about the heart. Jesus showed us that He cares more about the heart than your external expression. He wants to know what's going on at the root of you, and that's your heart. And so the challenge, I suppose, is having our hearts lined up with what God's will is, like that our hearts are in love with that, not the things of this world.
Yep. Exactly, that's right. You know, it's always God looks for the best in us, and He gives us the best at His perfect time. Sometimes we kind of mismatch that, and we try to go ahead, or maybe we do not know where we are placed, but as long as we are in God's will, and we say, God, what is your desire that you can give me? And so at the right time, God gives us, you know, even in our lives, so many times I think, sometimes we go ahead and ask God, we want to have this, or we want to get this, but God says, wait, this is not your time.
Yeah.
But when the time has come, it's so perfect, and that's the desire.
Yeah, there's a beauty in the desires God gives us as well, right? Because I do notice that challenge, that struggle within us of is this a good desire? Is this a godly desire? Is it a kind of a selfish one? And you actually reminded me of a verse that stood out to me a few years ago that's a little bit more of an obscure one. But when David wants to build the temple, there's a verse where God comes to him and says, you have done well to have this desire.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, we know that David was a man after God's own heart, right? So there is a point where our desires do lead us towards godly things if we are set on the right stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And in contrast to that, though, there's those desires where you're like, oh, Lord, please give me more money, or I would like a bigger house or a bigger car. And then you think about the motive. It's like, is your motive to have a bigger dwelling so you can house someone who needs accommodation? Is your desire for more income so that you can actually be more generous and feed the hungry? That's like a God will desire. But or is it just that you would be sitting on your pile of coins feeling like a lord? And actually that's the challenge that we all have as human beings, right? That wrestle with like the will of the flesh versus God's will, and aligning our hearts with that. And James, the book of James, is quite, I guess, fierce, and it packs quite a punch when it comes to kind of doing that and figuring out where our intentions are.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there's one thing that, as you were mentioning, it's always like when we are in God's line, sometimes, you know, for example, I'll tell you, if God is saying like, Chris, you stay in spot A. Okay, so let's say, for example, you stay in spot A, and then suddenly I see someone in spot B falling from a chair, or he is about to get hurt. So what is my immediate intention is to go and help that person. But let me go back. You know what God told me? Stay in that place there.
Right.
But so many times what I'm trying to do is, let me be, okay, God, give me money, or give me this. I want to go and help. But God knows how to take care of the other person.
Right.
But it's a simple act of obedience to his will.
Wow. So look, Chris, when we're talking about this idea then of our desires, what are some things that come to mind for you in terms of how we can realign and at least make sure that our focus is on the right place so that our desires will lead us into good places?
It's always, I personally, I feel like more than my desires, God, let your will be done. It's Matthew chapter 6, it says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. And maybe my desires sometimes can be wrong, or maybe I might mistime that. But I always say, God, let your will be done, and let your will be done at the perfect time. And whatever the desires, for me, like personally, to be frank, like my desire is, God, my desire is I want to do your will, something that can please your heart.
Yeah, and you know what you've reminded me of? The fact that Jesus actually laid the foundations of prayer down for us. He showed us how to pray. And that whole section in the Lord's Prayer, like, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Yes.
God knows what we need, but we just need to follow the example of Christ, don't we?
Exactly. Just follow him. And that's the basic thing, And, while I was reading the book of James, it was talking about humility, and it's such a challenge always to humble ourselves. But Bible says, humble yourselves in the sight of God, and he will lift you up. Today we are living in a world where there is always position.
Right.
What can I get? How can I go about this? And so many times that humbleness, sometimes it's so hard, and because of the world we are living in. But we need to be as a light to the world. And one of those things is humility.
Yeah, it also means too that when that promotion does come from God, you're more likely to stay there.
Exactly.
Like you see plenty of people who see somebody else's position and think, I want to be there, I would do a better job, but I'm the one who should be in that position, not them.
Yeah.
But then our own ego gets in the way and brings us down. Whereas when God promotes us, when we're ready, we can have that confidence, right, that he's been preparing us.
Exactly. That's what was talking in James chapter 4, verse 1. Why is there fights and quarrels among you? I'm not able to get into that position. Why? Why am I not able to get this? Why am I not able to have this? It's always kind of a thing that's a battle that is going on in our mind. But on the other hand, if we trust in him, and then what happens?
Yeah, and ultimately what we're looking forward to is that promotion in heaven, right?
Yeah.
Not
Exactly.
in this world.
That's right.
Great discussion this morning. Well,
Yeah.
Pastor Chris Dawson from the River Church, thank you so much for coming in and being part of our small group today.
Thank you, Andrew.
Amazing. I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did.
Yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe and turn your notifications on so you don't miss the next video.
We'll see you in the next one.